Yeah, are we live? Yeah, are we live? Yes or no? Chat, are we live right now, chat? Yeah, are we live? Yes or no? Chat, are we live right now, chat? Yeah, are we live? Yes or no? Chat, are we live right now, chat? Holy shit, what the fuck was that noise, man? Shit, I'm tired as fuck. Let's watch this video.
Recently? Well, it's because camera technology tends to improve and move very, very slowly. It takes camera companies years and millions of dollars to research, test, and tweak every little component before they've made enough progress to release a brand new camera body. Think about autofocus, for example. Older cameras used to take a little bit of time. They'd only have a small number of autofocus points within the viewfinder when you're taking your images. And now with a high-end mirrorless camera, they can track literally a bird's eye as it flies past you mid-flight. This is incredible, but it did take a team of many engineers, probably a decade or more at this point, to perfect the autofocus algorithm to achieve this result. And let me break this down for you with a little bit of data that I got from a anonymous, we'll call him that, an anonymous industry insider. So, market research alone, just figuring out what photographers want from the camera bodies that they're going to buy, can cost anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000. Then there's prototyping the camera body, where engineers create multiple test models, they adjust the design, the electronics, and the build quality, and that step could cost anywhere from $50,000 to $200,000, and that's before they even start sourcing components that would be suitable for a mass-produced product like a camera body. Then when manufacturers place bulk orders for premium materials like magnesium alloy or other components needed for weather sealing and high-end processors, well, at this point they're already hundreds of thousands of dollars deep in production costs. And then there's software. There's autofocus systems, image stabilization, and high-speed processing. And all this doesn't appear out of thin air. These coding and firmware development costs can add at least another $250,000 to the bill. So yeah, R&D, research and development for a new camera body, isn't just a small part of the price of an expensive camera, it can be a massive part of it. But even after all of this investment, camera companies aren't making bank on every sale. And that's because they don't sell nearly as many camera units as you probably think that they do. Okay, smartphones sell by the hundreds of millions. Cameras? Well, not even close. If you've ever wondered why iPhones get cutting edge camera technology before the actual cameras do, this is why. Apple has literally got the budget to develop new sensors, image processors, computational photography tools, because, well, they're going to sell 1 billion phones that use this technology over the next decade. Canon, Sony, and Nikon, well, they're lucky if they sell a few million bodies in an entire year. And let me give you some real numbers here. In a Nikkei industry report from 2023, Canon sold just over 3.3 million units. In second place, Sony sold around 2 million units, and Nikon followed in third with around 800,000 units. And, well, for context, Apple shipped 77 million iPhones in just the last quarter of 2024. So, for the camera manufacturers, this means small production runs, which means higher costs per unit. And every time that a company designs a new camera, they've then got to factor into the cost of all this new molds, assembly lines, new testing equipment. It goes on and on and on. And because they're selling in much lower numbers, they've then obviously got to price each unit higher to cover their expenses. Never mind the profit, just their own expenses. And this is why camera companies often reuse different parts across different camera models across different ranges. I don't know if you've ever noticed that some cameras share the same sensor or viewfinder. This isn't because camera manufacturers are lazy, it's because making a brand new sensor or a brand new viewfinder for every single model will very quickly get stupidly expensive. So yeah, where we are right now with camera manufacturing and the photography industry in general, camera manufacturers aren't exactly rolling in cash. But that doesn't mean that they are not spending a fortune to convince you to buy their products. For just 1 second here, imagine that you're the CEO of a camera manufacturer. You've spent millions developing your latest model, you've packed it with cutting edge technology. But here is the problem. No one's going to buy that camera if they don't know that it exists. And this is where marketing comes in. And marketing for any product, never mind a premium product like a modern mirrorless camera, it can be expensive. And well, the big camera brands don't just put out a press release and hope for the best. They spend millions upon millions on advertising, influencer partnerships, and brand sponsorships as well. You've seen it, right? Every YouTube photographer suddenly switches to the latest fancy camera when it arrives, and somehow every pro on Instagram is suddenly all of a sudden publishing photos from that new camera model. This is called influencer marketing, right? You won't see it on our channel, but you see it on most other photography channels. All of this is not a coincidence. It's how camera manufacturers in the internet age market their products. And branding plays a huge role on the pricing of camera equipment. If you've ever wondered why Leica cameras cost very literally more than the price of a small car, well, it's not just about the build quality or the components that go into manufacturing Leica cameras. It's about exclusivity. Some photographers, well, they're willing to pay the extra for the brand name, the history, and the feeling of owning something premium. And I'll take this from someone who is literally a world-class sales and marketing expert. I mean, my business that pays for Photography Explained and all the production that we do over here is literally called salesman.com. I'm telling you, the perception of luxury and the feeling that you get from a luxury item, well, it's mostly manufactured by marketers. And what's kind of weird is that even with the power of marketing, well, some camera brands are still struggling to drive revenue. I won't call out the brand on this channel, but a smaller camera manufacturer reached out to work with Photography Explained recently. And I've actually worked with that brand on something else in a past life that I've had before I started Photography Explained, so it would have been really congruent, it would have been a great marketing campaign, we would have done loads of good work together, but well, they couldn't afford to work with us. That is how tight their profit margins are. I got told very bluntly that they couldn't spend any more that quarter on marketing without losing money on their camera sales. That's mad, right? And here is something else that's crazy. Just because cameras seem expensive doesn't mean that you need to go and spend a fortune to take great photos. There's actually a much better way to buy your gear. If you're watching this, you're probably an amateur photographer, just like myself. And well, most amateur photographers don't need the latest and greatest gear to take incredible photos. And so if you want to save thousands of dollars, here's a simple trick. Buy your cameras used. Cameras aren't like smartphones. A 5-year-old mirrorless camera is still going to take phenomenal photos. In fact, some of the best landscape photographers that I know are using gear that's not 2 or 3 years old, that's 2 or 3 generations old. Because, well, the improvements in the new models are often so marginal. I mean, take my A7 R4. I've got 2 of these that I take out when I'm doing my landscape photography. I bought both of them for half the price of the newest version of the camera. And guess what? The sensor is exactly the same. And for landscape photography, basically there's going to be 0 difference in image quality. But if I'd bought the latest model, if I'd been sucked into all of the Sony marketing, I'd have paid thousands and thousands of dollars more for basically no improvements. And even when you move from amateurs to professionals, they often buy used camera bodies because new gear doesn't necessarily mean better results. Most pros only decide to upgrade their cameras when the camera physically breaks, usually the shutter, or they've been dropped one too many times, or when a new feature genuinely improves the photography workflow. So, unless you absolutely need that latest autofocus system or that fast burst rate, go save yourself some money and buy secondhand. That way you're going to spend less time stressing about your gear because it's cost you less cash, and so hopefully you can go spend more time actually taking photos. And well, if you're serious about improving your photography, I've got something for you. Getting great photos isn't just about having the best camera, it's also about knowing how to use it. And so if you want to instantly improve your photography, why not grab our free cheat sheets that covers everything that you need to know to take amazing landscapes, portraits, and a bunch of other genres of photography as well. I've left a link in the description to download your free cheat sheets today. And well, that is why expensive camera bodies are expensive. And if you'd like to understand what makes expensive camera lenses expensive, then why not click the video that's on the screen right now.
So camera lenses can be super confusing at first. Like, what do all of these numbers mean on the lens? What's the best lens for beginners? Which one should you choose if you're a photographer or you're into video? There's lots of questions. So in this video, let's break down everything there is to know about lenses for beginners.
You gotta just press record.
So starting off, what does a lens even do? Well, a camera lens allows light to pass through different pieces of glass called lens elements. And these elements are designed to bend light to focus the light on hitting your camera sensor at a particular spot, thus creating your image. So without a lens, your DSLR or mirrorless camera is practically useless. Now, all cameras leverage a specific mounting system to attach your lens to your camera body, and each brand is going to have its own lens mounting system. So Sony right here uses the E-mount system. So these cameras can only take lenses that are made for the E-mount, and this is whether or not you're buying a Sony branded lens or third-party lenses from companies like Tamron, Sigma, or here's a Viltrox lens right here, and it's an E-mount lens, so I can screw this directly on to a Sony E-mount camera, and it works just fine. Now what's weird is a company like Canon for their older DSLRs use the EF mount, while their newer line of mirrorless cameras use the RF mount. So even within the same camera company, there's sometimes different mounts that these cameras use. So you have to make sure that you purchase the right lens for the right camera. There are some lens mount converters out there, but there are quite a few trade-offs when you start trying to like put a Canon lens on a Sony body and stuff. So I would typically steer clear of that and just purchase the appropriate lens for your camera type. Now, one of the most important factors for any lens is its focal length, and every lens has a focal length that's expressed in millimeters, and you'll see this on the lens as mm. You might see 20 millimeters or 50 millimeters or even a range like 70 to 200 millimeters. These are all different focal lengths. Now, focal lengths are important for a few different reasons, and the first is that it determines your field of view, otherwise known as FOV. So this is how much of your scene is going to be captured. How wide is your shot going to be, or how tight will your shot be? Focal lengths with a wider FOV are things like 11 millimeters, 16 millimeters, and 20 millimeters, and these are great for showcasing wide scenes like landscapes or buildings, or even recording in smaller studio spaces like I'm in right now. I'm actually using a 20 millimeter lens in my loft studio space. Now, focal lengths with a medium field of view are things like 35 millimeters or 50 or 70 millimeters, and these are great for everyday shooting and just filling a variety of needs. And then focal lengths with a tighter field of view are things like 85 millimeters or 105 or 200 millimeters and beyond. These are known as telephoto lenses, and these are great for capturing subjects that are further away from your camera, like wildlife photography or sports content or concerts and more. So that's how your focal length affects your different fields of view. Now, focal length will also determine your lens compression, and compression is the effect where objects in the background appear to almost be closer to your subject when you're using longer focal lengths like telephoto lenses. And this happens because telephoto lenses narrow your field of view like we talked about, but they also magnify distant objects, and they make the background seem larger and closer to your subject than a wide angle lens would. So just know that when you use a longer focal length, your image is going to look more compressed. Now, the third main factor that focal length affects is lens distortion, and wider focal lengths will tend to be a little bit more distorted, and they're going to make the world seem almost like stretched out or expanded. Sometimes even straight lines like buildings are going to start looking curved with these wider focal lengths. And then tighter focal lengths, on the other hand, tend to minimize distortion, keeping lines more straight, and overall your image will just look more natural when you use these tighter lenses. Now, all lenses fall under two different categories. You have prime lenses and you have zoom lenses. And prime lenses have a fixed focal length, so their focal lengths cannot be changed. So a 50 millimeter lens like this is only going to give you that 50 millimeter field of view. And if you want to get closer or even wider from your subject, you have to physically move your camera to recompose your image. They also usually have fewer elements inside outside of them and usually can produce sharper images than zoom lenses. And finally, they also usually have the ability to have a wider open aperture value for shooting in low light situations and just getting a shallower depth of field. Now, zoom lenses, on the other hand, can vary their focal length by adjusting different lens elements with zoom. So a common zoom range with a zoom lens would be something like this. This is a 24-70 zoom, or you might see a 70-200 telephoto lens, but there's a wide range of zoom lenses out there. Zoom lenses are certainly more versatile than prime lenses for quickly getting different types of shots like wides, mids, and tights, but these lenses are also often less sharp than prime lenses because they have more elements and more complexity to them. They also often have an aperture that doesn't open as wide as a prime lens does, and it's common to see a maximum aperture on a zoom lens be f2.8 or 3.5 or f4, which will just let in a little bit less light. Is one of these style of lenses better than the other? Well, not really. It kind of just depends on what you're going for. If you want the sharpest possible results, then you probably would need to use a prime lens. If you want more versatility and you're more on the go and you need to recompose different kinds of shots quickly, then you'd go for a zoom lens. It all just kind of depends on your specific needs, and your needs might change depending on what you're shooting. Now let's talk about aperture. And aperture controls how much light enters your camera through the lens and also affects your depth of field. And it's measured in what's called f-stops, like f1.8 or f16, and you'll typically see these f-stop values actually on your lens most of the time. A lower f-stop number like f1.8 creates a really wide aperture opening, which lets in a ton of light for your camera sensor, which particularly can help in lower light situations. And an aperture of 1.8 is also going to produce a really shallow depth of field. So this is going to give you that really nice blurry background for beautiful looking shots. It's great for isolating a subject from the background, or for YouTube videos like this one right here, or even doing product B-roll and photography. Getting that shallow depth of field is a really sought after look. Now, a higher f-stop number like f16 actually creates a really small aperture opening on your lens, and that's going to let in less light. So this can actually be helpful on bright sunny days to cut out light from hitting your sensor so you can actually get correct exposure if it's too bright outside. But this is also going to produce a wider depth of field, so it's going to keep more of your scene in focus. This can be really helpful for shooting landscape photography or video, or really just any situation in which you want more of your frame in focus. Now, lenses can either have a constant aperture or a variable aperture. Now, constant aperture lenses will apply to all prime lenses, as well as more expensive lenses that are designed so that when you zoom in, your aperture isn't going to change values at all. But variable aperture lenses, on the other hand, change their aperture as you zoom into tighter focal lengths. And this is especially common on the standard kit lenses that are shipped with most of these cameras, because it's just more affordable to make lenses in this fashion. So as you check out this kit lens that I put on my Sony camera, as you zoom in from 18 millimeters to 55 millimeters, my aperture is actually going to automatically stop down from 3.5 to 5.6, which reduces the amount of light hitting my sensor. So it's really important to know whether your lens has a constant aperture or not, because it actually is going to affect the rest of your camera settings. Now let's talk about the difference between a full frame lens and an APS-C or crop sensor lens. So some lenses are designed to work with a larger sensor, like a full frame sensor, and then others are designed to work with smaller APS-C crop sensor format cameras. And what's really key about this distinction is that when you're using an APS-C camera, regardless of the lens you put on it, whether it's a full frame design lens or an APS-C, your effective field of view is actually going to change because of the size of the sensor. So this is known as crop factor. Maybe you've heard this phrase before, which refers to the multiplier that you'll add to whatever lens you're shooting on when you're using an APS-C camera. Now, if that confuses you, you're not alone. Let's break it down really simply. So take this 20 millimeter lens, for example. On a full frame camera, this 20 millimeter lens would give you a true 20 millimeter field of view. Makes sense, right? It's 20 millimeters, it should be 20. But when you put the same lens on a crop sensor camera, you're gonna multiply the focal length by 1.5x. And that will be the case on Sony and Nikon and Fuji and most of the camera brands, except for Canon, which Canon is weird, and you would multiply it by 1.6 times on all of Canon's cameras. So that means by putting a 20 millimeter lens on a APS-C camera, you're actually getting a 30 millimeter field of view because of the difference in sensor size. So the main takeaway here is, if you like the wide field of view you get when you're shooting on a full frame camera, if you want that same field of view, you're gonna have to shoot on even wider lenses on APS-C. So something like 10 millimeters or 16 millimeters is gonna get you that wider look when you're shooting on crop sensor cameras. What's also interesting is I shoot on Sony cameras, and you can actually place any full frame lens on a crop sensor camera and it's going to work just fine. But when I put an APS-C lens on my full frame camera, you can see quite a bit of vignetting around the edges because that lens isn't designed to shoot with such a large sensor, so you're going to get some vignetting when you do that. Most full frame cameras do actually have an APS-C crop mode that you can turn the camera into, and now you're able to use APS-C lenses more effectively. And if any of that just confused you, please drop a comment down below and we'll be sure to help you out. Alrighty, so now we're going to talk about all things focusing, starting with autofocus versus manual focus. So not every lens is going to have autofocus, especially really large cinema lenses or even older vintage lenses. Maybe you have like a film camera that you're adapting a lens from, that lens might not have autofocus. Nowadays though, most lenses actually do have autofocus capabilities, so you don't have to manual focus your lenses. Most of the time you're going to use autofocus for recording video or taking photos, but sometimes manually focusing your lens is nice because it can ensure that your focus position is not going to change no matter what is happening in your camera frame. I actually use manual focus probably on like a weekly basis when I'm recording B-roll, because there are times where I feel like my camera's autofocus is almost too fast or too snappy, and sometimes swapping into manual focus can just give me more control over what my focus is doing. There's also something called minimum focusing distance, and every lens has a closest distance that it's able to focus on. And if your subject is closer than this minimum focusing distance, your camera won't be able to focus on that subject anymore. So for example, this 24-70 Sony lens has a minimum focus distance of 0.38 meters or 1.25 feet. So you'll see this number on your lens most of the time. So in order for this lens to be in focus, I have to be a minimum of 1.25 feet away in order for it to actually hit focus. So just take a look at whatever lens you have and check out its minimum focusing distance. And if you need a lens that is able to focus really close on a subject, then you're going to want to look at what is called a macro lens to get those really close detail shots. And the last focus thing I'll talk about is focus breathing. So some lenses, especially ones that are a little bit more cheaply made, experience what's called focus breathing. And this is kind of a slight change in a lens's field of view when you change your focus position. So as you shift between really close and far subjects, your frame almost might look like it's subtly zooming in or out, which can be kind of confusing if you don't know what's going on. Well, it's probably the focus breathing happening with your lens. It's especially noticeable when you're recording video, and it can actually be pretty distracting to the viewer, so ideally you want to minimize this if you can. Some cameras, like my Sony a7 IV for example, have a setting called focus breathing compensation, where it will use software to correct for some of that focus breathing, which is actually a pretty cool setting, and you can turn that on if your camera has it. Otherwise, if you're using a lens that has really bad focus breathing, you can swap it into manual focus, and that will eliminate focus breathing entirely. So those are a few really important focusing features you need to know about your camera lens. Now, in terms of getting stable footage or photos, some lenses actually feature lens stabilization, which can help reduce vibrations and micro jitters that you get when operating a camera. So this can be especially helpful when you're shooting handheld and you just want to still have decently smooth footage. Some lenses actually even have a physical switch where you can turn lens stabilization on and off really quickly if you don't want to use it, which is pretty neat. And an important note here is that not every lens features lens stabilization, and you will usually have to pay a little bit more money when buying a lens that has this feature. And just so you know, lens stabilization is different from IBIS, or in-body image stabilization, on your camera. So you actually can have one without the other. Your lens might have stabilization, but your camera doesn't have in-body stabilization, and vice versa. Or you can sometimes have both, and that's going to give you super stable footage. Now, most lenses will also come with a lens hood, which will screw onto the front of your lens to block out unwanted light from hitting your camera sensor. So this actually can be really helpful if you are recording outdoors and the sun is shining really brightly and maybe coming towards your lens. Sometimes that can produce an unwanted camera flare, so screwing on your lens hood can really help with that. Also on the front of your camera lens are some threads so you can screw on filters to your lens. So on your lens, usually you'll see a logo indicating the thread size of the lens that you're using. So this number right here, say 82, means that you'll need to purchase an 82mm filter to attach to this lens. There are also things called step up or step down rings that allow you to convert the thread size of your lens to a higher or lower number so that you can actually use different size filters with your lens. This is actually a little hack that I use sometimes if I only want to buy one specific filter and I don't want to buy that one filter for every size lens that I have. Then I'll just buy some step down rings and adapt the filter to my smaller lenses. And this saves me money, which I love saving money. So that's how thread sizes work. We'll link some filters and step up rings down in the description below. So with all of this information, what is a lens that you might want to pick up first? Well, typically the easiest lens to get as your first lens would be a kit lens. So these are typically the lenses that are shipped with these different camera bodies, and they're usually pretty cheap. You can get them for about $100, maybe $150 add-on to your camera when you purchase it, and that's a pretty good starting point. If you're ready to upgrade your lenses a little bit and you're on the APS-C format, the two lenses that I'd recommend you look at first are the Sigma 16mm f1.4 lens, which is a beautiful lens that'll let in a bunch of light for shooting in lower light situations, and also with that lower aperture value is going to give you a really shallow depth of field for beautiful looking shots. There's also the Sigma 18 to 50mm f2.8 lens, and that constant 2.8 aperture is going to be really helpful for not having to change your exposure so much when you're zooming in and out, and that 18 to 50mm range will be a really versatile option for the APS-C format. If you're on full frame camera systems, one of my favorite lenses is this Viltrox 20mm f2.8 full frame lens. It's super budget as well. It's like $158 or $170 depending on when you buy it. It's really budget friendly, and honestly, optically it looks pretty solid. I also love the Tamron 28 to 75, which is very similar to the Sigma because it has a constant 2.8 aperture and it's a similar zoom range on the full frame format. That 28 to 75 will be a really similar field of view to what the Sigma 18 to 50 would be on APS-C. So those are just a few lens options to get you started. If you do want to check out some other lens options, I have 6 of my favorite budget lenses for Sony cameras in this video right here that you can check out on screen, and we'll see you in the next one. If you're looking for the best beginner camera for video this year, you have quite a few options. Here at Think Media, we have tested over 100 different cameras, but right now there are 7 cameras that stand out in our mind as the best options for beginners. They range in price from about $500 up to $1,000, and in this video we'll talk about the pros and cons for going for each one of these cameras and which one might be the best option for you.
You gotta just press record.
So the first camera on our list is the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. We have absolutely adored this camera at Think Media over the last year, and there's a lot of great things about this camera, starting with the fact that, in our opinion, this is honestly the perfect vlogging camera. If you're on the hunt for the best vlogging camera, I honestly wouldn't look any further. You don't even need to keep watching this video. None of the other cameras on our list are a better vlogging camera than the Pocket 3. This thing is outstanding for vloggers. It's just so easy to use for both beginners and professionals alike. If you are a beginner, just leave the camera in auto video mode and your results are going to look amazing straight out of the camera. And if you're a professional and you want to tap into some of this camera's higher end features, there's a lot of advanced features you can leverage, like manual video exposure if you want to manually set your settings like shutter speed and ISO. There's also the ability to adjust your white balance for different color scenes, and you can also shoot in the D-Log-M profile for retaining the most color and exposure information out of your camera. This thing is just honestly a beast even for professional video creators. My favorite feature by far though is the active track mode, where the camera can literally track your face wherever you're at in the frame. This thing is honestly crazy, and it's actually the #1 reason why I recommend people buy this is because of this distinct feature. This kind of just gives you a little camera assistant in your pocket. So I know for me, a lot of times I like to go out and I'll have my wife help me shoot videos, or a friend who's a videographer or something, and I'll give them a camera and they'll record me and take B-roll of me. But a lot of people don't have that luxury to have somebody who's a creative who can make content for them. But with the DJI Pocket 3, you're able just to go set this thing. I often set it on like a bench or even just on the ground if I'm wanting to get a wide shot or like sort of a creative talking head style shot, and it's going to track you perfectly in the frame, no problem. You could also turn this feature on in your studio environment or in a webcam live stream scenario, and rest assured knowing that no matter where you move in the frame, your camera's always going to track you to make sure that you're in an optimal position. The Pocket 3 can shoot in so many different resolutions and frame rates, up to 60 frames per second in 4K resolution, and the image quality honestly looks incredible for how tiny this camera is. Every time I take this camera out vlogging or using it as a B-roll camera, I love the images that the Pocket 3 can produce. If you ever need to step away from the Pocket 3, you can actually monitor your video signal from your camera using the DJI Mimo app. So this is a really cool app that's free from DJI. And you can also, with this app, add some additional effects to your video signal. Some of these effects are ridiculous and I would never use them, but some people actually might find them beneficial. So you can check out those effects in the app as well. There's a USB-C port on the Pocket 3 as well that can support a webcam feature. So you can use this as a 1080p webcam, which is really cool. Or you can input other USB-C audio devices, such as audio interfaces or microphones that are USB-C, to improve the audio quality that's going into your DJI Pocket 3. And it also has a built-in audio receiver to receive audio from the DJI Mic 2 system. So your audio needs are covered no matter what you want to do with the Pocket 3. And then of course there's a really cool feature where you can flip the screen from horizontal to vertical mode to instantly switch between horizontal and vertical aspect ratio shooting. So this is perfect for people who do a lot of social media content and YouTube content, and you're sort of bouncing back and forth between these different resolution formats. So for YouTube, obviously a lot of what we do here at Think Media is widescreen. But if we're making YouTube shorts or Instagram reels or TikToks, we'd obviously like to shoot in vertical format when we can. And the Pocket 3 makes this so easy to do just by twisting and rotating the screen. Now, the only drawbacks with the Pocket 3 would be that it is a smaller sensor size. So if you are worried about being in low light situations and you're somebody who often films outdoors at night or in lower light indoor environments, you might see your image quality suffer with the Pocket 3 just because it has a tinier sensor. I took this to a museum with my family though, and honestly was really surprised at how well it performed in these lower light situations. And it's also kind of an unusual form factor or like shooting experience, because a lot of these cameras that we'll talk about in this video leverage kind of the traditional DSLR or mirrorless style camera format where you would shoot with two hands, and it's a more typical experience of shooting with a camera. But the Pocket 3 is more like using some sort of like selfie stick or something. So it could feel like a little bit of a learning curve at the beginning as you start using this. But if you just give it a few days or a week, I bet you're going to really love your experience of shooting with the Pocket 3, because that was my experience. Overall, this is an outstanding value. It's about $519 for the camera itself, or around $670 for the Creator Combo, which we highly recommend. I love all the accessories that come in the Creator Combo, and we'll link that down in the description below. Now, the next camera on our list is from Nikon, and Nikon hasn't historically been known as a company that focuses so much on the video aspects of their cameras, but lately they have been killing it and providing users with really high quality video options. So Nikon's current entry-level mirrorless camera is the Nikon Z30, and there's a lot of benefits for going with this camera, especially if you're a Nikon user. The Nikon Z30 retails for $607, which is a pretty weird price point. It's not like a round number, which I think is weird, and that's for body only. But when you stack that price point up against the other cameras on our list, that's actually a pretty competitive price. The first thing that I love about the Z30 is its stabilization. This thing has an incredible image stabilization built into the camera, especially when you enter into the sport mode, which is sort of like the active stabilization mode of the Z30. What's so cool about the Z30 is it doesn't have a big crop like a lot of the other cameras have when you put them in their best stabilization setting. You keep the same field of view when you enter into that stabilization mode. So this is going to be great for content creators and vloggers who want stable footage but don't want to sacrifice the focal length that they're typically shooting at. For video results, you get 4K up to 30 frames per second and 1080p up to 120 FPS, and that's pretty common for this range of cameras right now that we're talking about in this video. The video quality on the Z30 honestly looks really good. I remember back in the day I used to shoot on Nikon camera systems, and I would shoot on like the Nikon D7000 or the D500, some of these other crop sensor cameras from Nikon that they produced many years ago, and the video quality just looked awful on those cameras. So Nikon has come a long way in providing users a better video experience out of their cameras. We also get really good autofocus performance with both eye autofocus tracking and phase autofocus tracking. I will say it is a little less snappy than Sony and Canon's autofocus, but all things considered, it is really good and totally usable for a YouTube studio environment or vlogging out in the streets. The Z30 has a 21 megapixel sensor, so you're going to get really good photo performance out of this camera as well. So if you're a photographer and want sort of a hybrid style camera, the Z30 could be a really good option. I also love the design and the feel of the Z30. It's got a really deep and large grip, which feels really good in the hand. Unlike some of the other cameras that we'll talk about in our list, I think this is one of my favorite form factors out of a compact mirrorless style camera that I've seen in a long time. You also get some cool features like some extra function buttons over by the lens mount, which is really helpful to map some different functions to. You get a physical switch on the dial to switch from video to photo mode, which is cool. You get a tally light on the front of the camera to let you know if you're recording video, and the touch screen interface is fully operational. So you can touch the screen to set your autofocus point as well as have full menu control via the touch screen on the back. And the screen is a fully articulating flip screen, so this is great for vloggers out there or for people who want to shoot YouTube style videos like this one, but you don't want to purchase an external monitor. This screen can flip towards you and you're able to see yourself while you're recording video, which can save you a lot of money. Now, the Nikon Z30 does not have a viewfinder, so if you're a photographer out there, you might be looking for a viewfinder. This might not be the camera for you if that's the case, but the fact that they did remove the viewfinder made this camera more compact, which a lot of people might prefer over having the viewfinder. You also don't get a headphone jack to monitor audio, which could be a deal breaker for more professional video shooters. If you want to real-time monitor your audio signal, that could be a deal breaker because sometimes it's really good to hear what kind of audio you're recording in the moment. The sensor in this camera can only shoot 8-bit color as well, so all that really means is it's not going to give you as wide of range as colors to work with in post-production. For a lot of people, this won't make much of a difference, but if you're wanting to move into more professional video situations later down the road, this camera might suffer a little bit depending on what type of content you're wanting to shoot. Overall, this is a really good camera, especially for those of you who are familiar with Nikon cameras already, and if you want to stay in that Nikon ecosystem, this is a great everyday camera for content creators. And I will say this, I'd honestly keep an eye out for what Nikon is going to do in the future because they just recently purchased the camera company Red, who makes high-level cinema cameras. So obviously they're in touch with what's happening in the video space. So I won't be surprised if we see some really awesome video features coming out of their latest Nikon series cameras. The next camera on our list is the Canon EOS R50, which is Canon's second cheapest mirrorless camera that they make right now, behind the R100, which we're not talking about the R100 in this video because it has some serious limitations for video shooters. It's a decent camera, but the R50 is really what we'd recommend as the baseline entry-level video camera from Canon's ecosystem right now. It was released back in 2023 and retails right now for $629 for the body only. In a lot of ways, the R50 is very similar to the Nikon Z30, and honestly, a lot of these cameras are really similar to each other, but there are some key differences with the R50, including you get a viewfinder with the R50. So you photographers out there are going to love this. If you're a photographer shooter or even a video shooter, sometimes it's helpful to be able to look through the viewfinder if it's a really bright sunny day and the sun is shining directly on your screen. It can get tricky to see your composition and make sure that your exposure is correct. So the viewfinder could be a really helpful tool in those kinds of situations. I'd also say that the autofocus performance of the R50 is a little bit better than the Nikon Z30, but it's still not as good as Sony's autofocus system. Sony just has autofocus on lock right now. With the R50, you get a 24 megapixel sensor, which is a really high quality sensor, and you can shoot 4K video up to 30 frames per second or 1080p up to 120 FPS. Now with that sensor, again, you're only able to shoot in 8-bit color, but it does let you shoot in a 10-bit color mode when you shoot in the HDR PQ mode. And in this mode, you're able to shoot in sort of like an HDR profile, but you're gonna have to do some serious color grading and even some like color space conversions away from HDR to make it look more natural. Overall though, it can produce a better image because it is 10-bit color, but most people will be fine with the standard 8-bit color that this camera produces, and are getting that beautiful Canon color that Canon is typically known for. People love the way that Canon cameras look straight out of camera, and this camera is no exception. You again get a fully flip out screen that's also touch enabled, so you can touch the screen to focus or even navigate the menu system, and you also get a pop-up flash. So in addition to the viewfinder, you get a flash unit as well. So this could be a really good camera for people who are hybrid shooters. So if you're a photographer and a video connoisseur, you might like the fact that this does have a viewfinder and a pop-up flash. But it's not all good things with the R50 because first and foremost, there's actually a 1-hour record limit with this camera in 4K resolution. So no matter what happens with this camera, you can only shoot in 4K for 1 hour. And I think Canon did this because it knows that this camera has some limitations. And if it allowed you to shoot longer than 1 hour, a lot of problems would occur. People would be overheating their cameras, overheating their sensors, and it would just be no good for anybody. So they instituted a 1-hour record limit for 4K video. But the crazy thing about that is oftentimes it actually overheats before it even gets to that point. And in our experience, in our testing, we typically found that around 40 minutes in 24 frames per second in 4K is when this camera would overheat, and then around like 30 minutes in 4K at 30 FPS. So this is not going to give you very long record time. So if you're somebody who needs to shoot like long form video podcasts, or even the video that I'm literally filming right now, I'm probably going to film all this A-roll for about an hour. This camera would not be able to handle that. I would have to sort of stop recording and then hit record again, let the camera cool down. So there's workarounds and there's ways that you can make it work. But typically, I would not want to go for a camera like this if I did long form video recordings. If you're somebody who has really large hands as well, you're not going to love this camera. I have pretty like moderately or even kind of like small hands, And this camera just feels so tiny, and I just don't love the way it feels in the hand. It's definitely my least favorite feeling camera of all of the cameras in our list, so that's just something to be aware of. If you have smaller hands than I do though, you might think it's fine. And also, again, you get no headphone jack to monitor audio. So I don't know what it is about these cheaper cameras, but they don't give you a headphone jack. I think it's kind of weird, but it's just something you want to know. Overall, it's a really good entry-level mirrorless camera, especially if you like Canon's color science for video and you don't mind the smaller body design. You're going to be able to get really good results for video and photo quality. As long as you're okay not being able to record longer clips in 4K resolution, this could be a great camera for you. The next camera on our list is the original Sony ZV-E10. This camera retails for $698 right now, but it's also often on sale. And actually right now at the time of recording this video, it just went on sale for $598. And that typically happens around the holiday seasons or on Amazon's Prime Day sales. You often can get this camera for quite a good deal. And all day long, actually, you can buy these used on Facebook Marketplace or eBay for around $500 to $550. So this is getting really down there in price point, and that's because it was released all the way back in 2021. So there are a lot of used options on the camera market, and this is one of Sony's best-selling cameras of all time, so they're readily available from used sellers. Frankly, this camera has a lot of the same specs as the Canon R50 and the Nikon Z30. You can shoot up to 4K resolution at 30 frames per second, and 1080p up to 120 FPS. So notice the trend here, these cameras all shoot similar frame rates and resolutions. You also get really good colors straight out of camera with no picture profiles. I love the way this camera looks straight out of camera. It honestly doesn't need very much editing and post-production if you just shoot with the standard picture profile. With this camera, you get really good autofocus performance for both photo and video shooters. So you never really have to worry about going out of focus when you shoot with the ZV-E10, and that's really one of the main benefits of even going with Sony in the first place. With this camera, they also finally gave us a headphone jack as well, so you can monitor your audio signals. So thank you, Sony, for doing that with one of your baseline cameras. It's great that you did that. The ZV-E10 is limited to 8-bit color as well, but they do give you the option to shoot in some different picture profiles like Sony's S-Log3 or S-Log2 picture profiles to retain the highest dynamic range of any given scene. You're also still on the older menu system, which some people like, some people don't like of these Sony cameras. It's just something to be aware of, that Sony's newer cameras have a different menu system. And you're on the older battery. This battery is super old, so this is the NPF W50 batteries from Sony, and these things do not last long at all. The newer Sony batteries are way better, and if I go out with my ZV-E10, I have to take like 7 batteries with me if I'm gonna shoot for a full day. So battery performance, not great on the ZV-E10. And also the camera's touchscreen capabilities are only limited to autofocus. So you can just touch the back of the screen to select an autofocus point, but you can't use the touchscreen to navigate the menu system, which is really unfortunate. And overall, the ZV-E10 is one of our highest recommended cameras of all time here at Think Media. And all around, it's just a really good camera. It's pretty good at everything. And as I look at these 3 cameras right here, the Canon R50, the Nikon Z30, and the Sony ZV-E10, honestly, these are really similar cameras. They're just in their own ecosystem, sort of. So if you're a Canon shooter, you're going to want to go with the R50. If you're a Nikon shooter, Z30, Sony, ZV-E10, these are sort of the baseline entry-level cameras, and all of them honestly perform really well. Now, there are a few more cameras we want to talk about that are a little bit more mid-tier, but they're still under that $1,000 price range. The first would be the Canon R10. So this is Canon's mid-tier professional style APS-C camera. It was released back in 2022, so it's actually a little bit older even than the cheaper R50. But there are several benefits for going with the R10 over the R50, including it's a way better body design. It just feels way better in the hand. It feels like a fuller grip, like you can actually grip this camera all day long, and you're not gonna like get a finger cramp because you can barely fit your fingers on this thing. I just don't love the build of the R50, honestly. You do get the same flip screen and touch screen that you get on the R50 as well with the R10, but one change you do see is we get 2 different dials on the body, so now you can control shutter speed and aperture with a dedicated dial. Rather, with the R50, you just get 1 dial on top of the camera, so it's not as intuitive. You do get a 24 megapixel sensor with the R10, and the colors look absolutely beautiful out of this camera. You get that great Canon color science, and with this camera, you can actually shoot 4K up to 60 frames per second, but you do get a pretty big crop in 4K when you shoot at 60 FPS, and then you can shoot in 4K at 24 and 30 frames per second with no crop. It is still that 8-bit sensor, but you can do the same thing where you shoot in that HDR PQ mode in order to get 10-bit color out of your camera, but then you got to do some serious color correcting because of that. So it's sort of a workaround to get 10-bit color in the R10 and the R50. It also shoots at a way faster 15 frames per second with the mechanical shutter for photography. So really the R10 is just sort of a beefed up version of the R50, and you can shoot at 4K at 60 FPS. FPS and shoot at faster speeds for photography. I will say though, with that 4K resolution, the R10 does experience pretty bad rolling shutter in 4K. So this is what's going to give you that sort of jello-y looking effect if you're whipping your camera really quickly for moving subjects. This isn't really going to be an issue at all if you're just filming static subjects or filming on a tripod. But if you're a sports shooter or you're shooting moving subjects pretty often, you will notice the rolling shutter in 4K. Also, the R10 can be prone to overheating at around 1 hour in 4K resolution. So even though it doesn't have the 1 hour limit for 4K recording like the R50 does, it still tends to overheat around 1 hour in 4K resolution. So while the R50 lasted around 30 or 40 minutes, this lasts for about an hour. You might be able to use this for a long form YouTube video or a podcast or something. But if it's something you need to record like for 2-3 hours at a time for a really long form video, this is not the camera for you. But at the end of the day, the R10 is sort of a beefed up version of the R50 for still under $1,000. You get really great video quality, good photo quality as well. And if you're a hybrid video and photo shooter, this is probably the best option on our list because you get the best video specs that Canon offers for under $1,000 here. You get a good viewfinder, the pop-up flash for photography, and overall, it's just a really solid camera. Now we have one more mirrorless style camera on our list, and then we'll mention one other camera that you're really gonna wanna consider. But the last mirrorless camera is the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II. This camera is around $998 at the time of recording this video, and this is one of the newest cameras on our list as it was released in 2024. They updated several things in the second version of this camera for content creators who are really wanting to get more professional results out of their budget mirrorless camera. The main benefits that you'll see right away is improved ergonomics. They put a way bigger grip on the ZV-E10 Mark II, and with that bigger grip, they were able to fit in a larger battery. So now this is rocking the Sony NPF Z100 battery in the bottom of the camera. And because they put a bigger battery down here, they also moved the SD card slot to the side of the camera, which is a big improvement over where it was in the first version. It was underneath the battery door, so you had to open the battery door in order to access your SD card. Now you can just get it from the side of the camera, which is a big win. They also updated the sensor in the Mark II, and now you're using the same sensor as the Sony FX30 and the A6700 have, which are much more expensive cameras. I'm actually recording on the Sony FX30 right now, so if I were to plop the ZV-E10 in this exact spot, you would see the exact same image quality. So if you like the way that this image looks right here, then you're gonna like the way the ZV-E10 Mark II looks as well. With that new sensor, you're gonna get 10-bit color just across the board, so you're able to shoot in many different resolutions and frame rates in that 10-bit color, which is gonna give you way better image quality, especially if you're trying to retain better color information out of your video footage. This newer sensor is also gonna give you better performance in lower light situations over the first version of this camera. The original ZV-E10 didn't perform horribly in lower light situations. I mean, it was fine, but this camera performs way better than the Mark I did. Other features with this camera are very similar. You get the fully flip out screen and you get a fully functioning touch screen now. So the first version of this camera only was able to touch focus. Now you can operate all the menus with the touchscreen, which is really nice. This camera also now has a dedicated vertical information display. So if you rotate the camera from horizontal to vertical mode, it's going to shift the orientation of your menu to vertical orientation, so you can see your settings a lot better. So this is a really sick feature. It's the first Sony camera to have this feature, and I think it's super helpful. Now at times the ZV-E10 Mark II can be prone to overheating, especially in 4K at 60 frames per second. This camera is just so tiny that it's not great at getting rid of the heat that it generates in these higher resolutions and frame rates. So if you're somebody who needs a lot of slow motion footage in that 4K 60 frames per second, this might not be the best fit for you, and you're going to need to spend a little bit more money on something like the A6700 or FX30. And the other con with the ZV-E10 too is it's just kind of expensive at nearly $1,000 for the body only. That's getting pretty up there in price, and some of these other cameras are closer to like $500 or $600. So you are spending quite a bit more to get the ZV-E10 Mark II. I will say it's a better experience than a lot of these other cameras, and the image quality looks outstanding even as you compare it to some of these other options. So it could be worth it to spend a little bit more and benefit you in the long run. But if you don't have the funds right now to drop $1,000 on a camera, there are some really good options that are cheaper on this list. And the last camera on our list only costs $1 more than the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II. And actually is technically 4 cameras, but also a phone. It's actually the baseline iPhone 16 Pro, which costs $999 and is a serious consideration if you're somebody who's looking at all these different cameras, or you're looking at the ZV-E10 Mark II. you could make a really good case that this is actually a better option for a lot of reasons. So as I said, you do get 4 cameras and lenses with the iPhone 16. You get the main camera, which is a 48 megapixel camera that shoots at 24 millimeters. You get an ultra wide camera that's also 48 megapixels. That's the equivalent field of view of about 13 millimeters. You get a 5x telephoto camera that's around 120 millimeters, I believe, that shoots at 12 megapixels. And then you get a front facing 12 megapixel camera on the front of the screen as well. So you get 4 cameras. That's kind of wild for $999. But you also get a phone, right? So you can use this as a phone. You can use this to browse the internet, to make phone calls, to do all sorts of things. And it's the same price of just getting a dedicated camera like this. Of course, the main benefit to using your phone is just maximum portability and ease of use. This thing fits in your pocket. It's always with you. You can take it wherever you go. And it's basically just point and shoot. And when you're shooting, even in the auto settings with this camera, the results look outstanding. I'm always really impressed with the way that my iPhone looks when I'm out and about making content with it. But a lot of people don't know that you can use your iPhone in some other ways that leverage more advanced features that people might not know about, including shooting in what's called ProRes log. So ProRes is a codec that just is a really high quality codec that retains the most information out of your video file. And when you shoot in ProRes, you can also shoot in the ProRes log format, which is a log video profile, which is sort of a flat profile that you can color correct your image after the fact. And really it just puts the iPhone more in line with what a lot of these professional mirrorless cameras can do, especially like the ZV-E10 that's around $1,000. The image quality looks really similar when you compare these two images. By also leveraging the USB-C slot right here, you could plug in a solid state drive to record video files to an external memory device. So this is really cool to just save yourself space. Now all of these other cameras use standard SD cards, right? Obviously that's something we've all used for years. But the iPhones now can attach solid state drives and you can record to SSDs directly, which is really cool. And there's also some third-party apps like the Blackmagic camera app, which allows you to shoot in manual exposure with your iPhone. So now you can adjust some of your settings like aperture and ISO and white balance and even focus. You can manually focus with your phone if you wanted to. So these are a lot of the things that people don't think of when they're looking to buy their first camera. They don't really realize the potential that their phone has to be a professional video creation tool. And the craziest thing about it is you could run an entire YouTube channel just from this single device, right? So for pre-production of a video, you could plan all your video scripts, you could watch competitor videos, you could leverage AI tools like chat with ChatGPT right here to come up with video concepts right there. And then when you're ready to shoot, you could take this out in the field and record with your camera and shoot all of your content. And then you could then edit the video using your mobile editor, something like CapCut. You could use CapCut to edit your video. And then you could upload the video to your YouTube Studio app and even monitor your analytics and your watch time, all of that stuff. This is an all-in-one YouTube Studio solution right here just by leveraging your phone. So for a lot of people, really your phone might be the best option. I personally like to use my phone as a phone. I like to use my phone for other purposes. But if I was going to choose one camera on this list that might be my personal favorite, it would probably be the DJI Pocket 3 this year. I just loved using this thing. I think it's such a cool camera, and it's also the most affordable camera on our entire list today. If you think the Pocket 3 is right for you, you should definitely check out these 50 hidden features, settings, and tips that we made about the DJI Pocket 3. So if you want to check out the video, you can click or tap the screen right here, and then we'll see you in the next video.
If you're looking to buy a camera to start making content this year, but with so many different options out there, it's tough to know which one's actually worth your money. So in this video, I'll break it down and highlight some of our favorite cameras that we've actually used, so you can confidently choose which camera fits your needs and budget.
You gotta just press record.
Hey, what's up? Nate here with Think Media. Now, we get asked the question all the time, what is the best camera for YouTube if I want to start making videos this year? And really, there are a couple different factors I would consider when trying to buy a camera specifically for making YouTube content. Number one is you want a camera that's going to be easy to use. That way you can just focus on creating content. So having features like autofocus, having a flip out screen or a screen so you can see yourself is all going to be very helpful when you are making YouTube videos. And second is the ability to shoot at least 4K video. Now we want to make sure we have a really high quality image file to work with. With that being said, I broke this video down into a few different categories depending on each camera we talk about. And in our first category, we'll be discussing travel and vlog cameras. Which brings me to my first recommended camera for travel, and that is the DJI Osmo Action 5 Pro. This thing is incredible not only because it's small, but it's also extremely rugged. This thing is meant to be abused and thrown in different environments, and I'd rather use a camera that I know is extremely rugged rather than putting my expensive camera in those precarious situations. Not only that, this camera is very easy to use thanks to its big touchscreen on the back. I can adjust settings very quickly and intuitively. There's also a screen up front that I can use to view myself, frame myself in this shot without having to guess where I'm positioned in the frame. So having a little feature like that is so incredible and allows me to make sure I know I'm getting the shot. So this camera is super convenient, but it also has some really great image quality. And right now you can see just how great of an image this little camera can pack into it. Overall, I'm really impressed with the image quality, but it has some really impressive features that just also make it easy to use. Number one, there is this feature called Horizon Balance. So if I were to rotate my camera up to 45 degrees, it keeps my video nice and level, which is perfect if you're filming yourself. Maybe you don't have it perfectly level. It's going to do that all for you, and it has incredible smooth stabilization. So it's going to make sure that as you're filming, you're going to not get all those shakes and jitters in your footage. Another great feature that makes this a great vlogging camera is its battery life. You can shoot on one battery for around 3 to 4 hours, which can sometimes last me a full day on one charge. But if you pick up this Adventure Combo Pack, you can actually swap out for one of these batteries in this nice charging case. So really, you can be shooting for maybe a whole week without having to really worry about battery life. I can go on and on about the different features about this camera, like its built-in storage. So if you forget your SD card, you can still be able to record videos, which is a huge game changer, a huge lifesaver. In terms of price point, this camera comes in at $350 brand new. I've actually seen some deals for it even less, so I'll leave links in the description to this camera and all the gear mentioned in this video down below for you to check out. Now there's one more camera that I recommend if you are looking for a travel or for a vlogging camera, and that is the Osmo Pocket 3. And this camera is crazy popular, and really it boils down to its unique gimbal design. So because of this built-in gimbal design, it's going to counteract any of your shakes you might have when you're filming with it and give your footage a nice cinematic feel. So this not only is going to look great if you are filming yourself, but if you're filming your environment, the things around you, it just opens up the door to get a lot of creative and smooth angles that you want to be able to do with a traditional camera. Now recently I did a video where I compared the Action 5 Pro to the Pocket 3, and really the difference between these two guys is the image quality. They just look a little bit different, and that's thanks to the Pocket 3 larger sensor, which is going to give you a little bit blurrier of a background. I find this to be most notable if I am filming myself. It kind of creates a nice blurred background to my videos and helps separate you from your background. And I think that gives it a nice professional look to your videos, whereas in comparison to an action cam, it kind of has that traditional GoPro look. Maybe it's a little bit over sharpened. The Pocket 3 definitely has a noticeable improvement in terms of image quality. So yes, the Pocket 3 has great image quality, but it's also really easy to use. DJI has great menus that is very intuitive. Even if you are a beginner, you're able to adjust settings quickly. And perhaps one of my favorite features that both the Pocket 3 and the Action 5 Pro have is the ability to connect wireless microphones to the cameras. So both of these cameras have a built-in receiver, so all you gotta do is buy a little DJI mic transmitter, either the DJI Mic 2 or the DJI Mic Mini, and you can connect up to 2 different microphones to either of these cameras. So if you had one for you, one for your guest, that is a great and so easy way to get great audio for your video. In terms of price point, the DJI Pocket 3 costs $520. You could spend a little bit more money if you want to get the Creator Combo, which comes with accessories like the DJI Mic 2 and also tripods and little things that really make this a more well-rounded kit. That costs around $670, so a little bit more expensive than the Action 5 Pro, but I do think both of these cameras make fantastic travel/vlog cameras. Moving on to the next category, we're going to be discussing some entry-level mirrorless cameras. I kind of decided to keep the price point under $1,000 for this category. The mirrorless camera that I recommend for someone who is looking to start making content, maybe this is their first mirrorless camera, it is the Sony ZV-E10. And this camera checks off a lot of the boxes We have been recommending this for years here at Think Media, and there is good reason why. Number one, it has the ability to shoot 4K video, so you're going to get a really sharp looking image. It has a very large sensor, which is going to be helpful if you are trying to get a blurry background in your videos or when you are shooting in lower light conditions. This camera also has a flip out screen, which is incredibly useful if you are filming yourself. You can see what your settings are and actually see if you're in frame. So definitely recommended to have a flip out screen. And the third feature that makes this a great camera if you're filming videos of yourself is autofocus. Having a camera that has good and reliable autofocus performance is going to actually save you a lot of time and headaches. Like I mentioned earlier, this camera is a few years old, and that has some pros and cons. Number one is that there are more cameras out there that have better looking colors when it comes to shooting video. This camera is limited to what we call 8-bit video, which means you don't have a lot of flexibility if you are going to be color grading your videos. This camera also has the older style of Sony menus, which can be a little bit confusing, especially if you are a beginner. It's hard to follow along. But the benefits of it being an older camera means that you can actually find this camera for an absolute bargain. New, this camera costs around $600 to $700 depending on when you buy it. So this is a great option if you are starting out and you don't need all the bells and whistles. This camera is going to get you started and you're able to make great looking videos. Now, if you have a little bit more money to invest into a camera and want a few more upgrades when it comes to better looking videos, then I would recommend the Sony ZV-10 Mark II. Now, these cameras of course are quite similar, but where the ZV-E10 Mark II shines is its ability to shoot 10-bit video. Simply put, 10-bit means that you have more information to really color grade your videos and get it exactly where you want it. This is definitely going to be a lot easier than trying to do it with an 8-bit video like on the ZV-10. Also note that the colors on the ZV-10 Mark II look a little bit better in my opinion, even if you decide not to color grade your videos, and that's thanks to its upgraded sensor. This camera